Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de graça, ela...
Okay, one RockLords album every week for the next, however many weeks it takes to get through them. And this is week one. So we start right at the start with the Gypsys' first album, uninspiringly titled Gypsys I. Let's do it.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de graça, ela...
So when we think of the RockLords, we think of a whole range of different bands. We think of solo artists, we think of them all kind of coming out of the same family tree, the RockLords essentially being just a big family. And the Gypsys, they were the start of that family. And it happened quite by accident. The first people that kind of got together to play, I don't think they had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that it was going to spawn into something as big as it has.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de...
So the key personnel we're talking about in terms of this first album, Gypsys I, is myself. I'm playing guitar and at times singing, I think. We have Richard Allen, who is playing guitar and sometimes playing bass and basically providing the metal element of what we're doing. We have Baz, who for the very first recordings we did was just learning the guitar and actually had no idea what he was doing, but gradually was building up his ability to be able to play and fit in with the band. We had Mark, who was our classy piano player, and in terms of where we all were, he was actually the musician of the group. We all knew a little bit and we could do different things, but it was Mark who was already kind of way above us in terms of musicianship. And even though he only played in that first jam session that we had, so he was only on a few tracks within that album, he set us a very high standard to reach. We had our mate Dave, or David Vink, or Sushi as we called him. I'm not sure where that nickname came from. In fact, I know exactly where that nickname came from. He came along and sort of played some bass guitar with us, and he was just a great person to have there right at the start. And we had young Ant, who was 11 years old for our first jam session. Basically, we looked around and we thought, we need a drummer. We don't actually have a drummer. And my friend Paula, her brother Ant, who was only 11, he could play. He had his own drum kit, and those were all the requirements we needed. So we dragged him along, and he played for us and was just great for what we needed at the time. And eventually, after that jam session with those first 5 people, we then brought in Richard Brewer, who was a good friend of mine, who was a drummer that we could actually bring in and use, and he actually knew what he was doing. Not to say that Ant didn't, but Richard had been playing for a long time and again had his own drum kit, meets all the requirements of what we needed. And then eventually Bob, when we first started, Bob didn't play the drums. He was just he was playing the guitar, and he'd played a bit of drums at school, and for that first jam session he just watched. The second jam session he played guitar for us, but then he jumped on the drum kit and we were like, you should be doing the drums. And he eventually bought his own drum kit, and by the end of the sessions for Gypsys I, he was a drummer, and he was our drummer. And the Gypsys name, I used to listen to a lot of Jimi Hendrix, and Jimi Hendrix was, he had a band called the Band of Gypsys, and I loved that and listened to Hendrix, and I thought that'd be great, let's steal that name. So we became the Gypsys, and when I first used to write it on the tapes that I'd send around to people, I'd say a Band of Gypsys, but that just got shortened and we became the Gypsys, and that's who we were.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de...
The stuff that was on the radio at the time when we first started, things like Metallica and Nirvana, and we ended up playing Enter Sandman and Smells Like Teen Spirit so many times during our career, as I'm sure so many bands that came from the 90s did. And when we first started the band, the Gypsys, we basically were just playing whatever people decided at the time. Someone would say, hey, do you know such and such, and they'd start playing it and we'd just join in. And when you listen to the raw, unedited versions of our songs, of our sessions, that was all it was just joining in, and that was where everything started for us. In terms of originals, we started with just straight out blues jams. I was listening to a lot of blues at the time, and because I was kind of directing everything, it would be, we just start with 3-chord blues. So the first few jam sessions, that's all it is. The first few originals, that's all it is. Eventually, it became something a little bit stranger and a little bit more musically interesting, where we would take 2 chords or 3 chords in a pattern and just play them around and around and put little solos and fills on it, and it started to grow this idea of kind of creating these improvised songs. And we were certainly nowhere near the heights of the top jazz musicians or anything like that. But you know, we were starting to make things up, and we were trying things, we were pushing ourselves.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de...
The first jam session we had was August the 25th, 1993, and that was with those 5 people. That was myself, Richie, Mark, Baz and Dave. The next jam session we had was November the 13th, back in 1993 as well. Then on the 29th of January, the start of 1994, we had another jam session. Richard Brewer joined us, as did Bob. And we concluded with a jam session on March the 12th, 1994, where it was just the 4 of us, myself, Richard, Baz and Bob, all playing. Now, I took all the sessions and had them all recorded on a whole series of tapes, and I eventually collected them together into one 90-minute tape on a C90, if you can remember back that far, and a 90-minute tape, and I had it, and I called this little collection 9 Improvised Sessions, and it was basically our first 9 jam sessions, taking the best bits from it and putting it all together. Then in 2004, when I decided I needed to go through and computerise and digitalise everything, I took all the original recordings and went through and dumped them onto an MP3 format. And then when I looked at that, we actually had enough in one chunk for an album which became Gypsys I, and that was all of the stuff going from those first 4 jam sessions. So that's kind of how the Gypsys I album was born. It was actually some 10 years after the fact that we actually created this first album.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de...
When we first started, all of our jam sessions were in my lounge. They were in the lounge of my house. We had quite a big lounge. It was 5 metres by 5 metres. It's quite a huge area, and we would just push all the furniture out of the way, and we would set up the drum kit in one corner and all the other instruments arrayed around it. And we actually experimented in the first 4 sessions with where the drum kit would be placed, because in the first jam session it's very close to where we were recording things and the drums are very loud. And then in the 4th session, which only actually has 1 track from it, the drum kit was actually sitting in the dining room, and it was actually so far away that the sound was actually getting quite distorted, and it was out of time because we couldn't hear everything properly. So we did a lot of experimenting in those first 4 sessions.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de...
Why is a very good question. I think we were ready at that time to do something musical. We had all gone through high school together, and 1993 was our first year out of high school, so we'd all gone off to universities and polytechs and jobs and different things, and we'd never thought to do anything together as a group. We'd all done musical things in high school with different people, but together as a group we hadn't actually tried anything. And when the idea first hit us that we should, it was a bit strange. We were like, oh, why didn't we think of this before? And we would come back from our places of study, from University of Wellington and Polytech in New Plymouth and University in Palmerston. We'd all kind of come back together and meet up in our holidays. And so the August jam session, the one that started it all, was just our normal August holidays. We'd come back and we just decided, oh, let's get together and have a jam session. So over the next few years it began to be a bit of a pattern. Whenever there was enough of us in one place at one time, we would say, let's jam, let's record it, let's have some fun. And that was the birth of everything. And that was kind of the why. At the start it was just why not, and it worked. It worked.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de...
Over the RockLords career, we've done a lot of very interesting things. We've paid thousands of dollars to go into the best recording studios in Wellington. We've had 4-track recordings. We've had live recordings done through video cameras. But the first several Gypsys albums, but especially the first one, we had a stereo in the corner of the lounge, and we had a little microphone about this big. It was one of those microphones from an old video camera, and we poked it in one end and stuck the microphone out, and we set up the instruments around it, and we pressed record on the tape, and that was it. And when you listen back to it, you can hear the striking quality of this recording, and years later, when I went through, I took everything, put it into MP3, and I had to go through and do a certain amount of tidying up and getting rid of some hiss and things, and then after that, just going through and just cutting out the bits that worked and turning it into an album. And when you listen to the recording, you can hear it. The volumes are all over the place, and some things are louder than others. And especially that first August jam session where Anthony's drums are right next to the microphone, which was not our best move, but that was what it was.
Olha que coisa mais linda, mais cheia de.
So overall, the Gypsys' first album it's an artistic endeavour. It is an album fraught with mistakes, and the musicality of it is on the very low scale. In terms of the 49 RockLords albums that there currently are, that's got to be the least in terms of its quality. It's both in its sound quality and its musical quality. It's all over the place. So this is probably the album that I will apologise for, but it is a fascinating study in that it's the beginnings of the RockLords. It's beginnings of our collective musical input into the world. It sounds very huge and highfalutin, I'm not sure I can say that, but it's a band kind of discovering itself, which is fascinating to listen to. And I think the thing that I like the most about the album is you can listen to the album and you can hear the jokes, be they musical or otherwise, but you can hear a group of guys just hanging together, enjoying the crap out of things, and that's the first Gypsys album. It leads into far better things. If you haven't heard any RockLords stuff before and this is your introduction to the RockLords, can I just say it gets far better than this. But listen and enjoy. Gypsys I.